I'm Sarah Chen, 29 years old, and the day my future mother-in-law called my wedding plans embarrassingly modest was the same day I realized my family had been underestimating me my entire life. What they didn't know, what none of them could have possibly imagined, was that the man I was marrying came from a world so far removed from their understanding of wealth that their mockery would soon turn to stunned silence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all began, to a family dinner that would set everything in motion. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Sacramento, California, I was the middle child in a family that ran a moderately successful chain of 3 dry cleaning businesses. My older brother Marcus was the golden child, groomed from age 12 to take over the family empire, such as it was. My younger sister Vanessa was the baby, indulged and adored for simply existing. And then there was me, caught in the middle, neither the heir nor the cherished youngest. I learned early that my role was to be practical, helpful, and above all, not to cause waves or require too much attention. My parents, Linda and Thomas Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan in their 20s with almost nothing. They built their business through relentless work and careful spending. Every dollar was accounted for, every purchase justified. Frugality wasn't just a habit in our household, it was a religion. My mother kept spreadsheets of grocery expenses and compared prices across 3 different supermarkets. My father wore the same winter coat for 15 years, patching the elbows rather than replacing it. They were proud of their thriftiness, and they raised us to view any form of extravagance as a moral failing. The rules, however, applied differently depending on which child you were. When Marcus wanted to attend a prestigious business summer program in his junior year of high school, one that cost $4,000, my parents didn't hesitate. "It's an investment in his future," my mother explained when I asked why he got to go. "He'll be running the businesses someday. He needs these opportunities." 2 years later, when I asked if I could attend a creative writing workshop at UC Berkeley that cost $300, I was told that writing was a nice hobby but not a practical use of money. I should focus on my studies and find a sensible major that would lead to stable employment. Vanessa somehow existed outside these rules entirely. When she decided she absolutely needed a designer dress for junior prom, a dress that cost more than my entire wardrobe combined, my parents took her shopping and paid without complaint. "She's only young once," my father said with unusual sentimentality. "Let her have this special moment." I had worn a dress from Target to my own prom, altered by my mother to fit better, and had been praised for being so sensible and budget-conscious. College was where the disparities became impossible to ignore. Marcus attended UCLA on a combination of scholarships and family funding. My parents covered his housing, gave him a reliable used car, and provided a monthly allowance for expenses. When he graduated, they hired him directly into the family business at a salary that seemed generous for someone with no prior work experience outside summer internships they had arranged for him. My path was different. I received a partial scholarship to San Francisco State University and worked 25 hours a week at a campus bookstore to cover the rest. I lived in a cramped studio apartment with 2 roommates, both of whom had very different ideas about cleanliness and quiet hours. I ate cheaply, studied relentlessly, and graduated with a degree in communications and a minor in marketing. My parents attended my graduation but left immediately after the ceremony because they had to get back to the business. There was no celebratory dinner, no gift beyond a card with $50 inside and a note reminding me to be wise with money. After graduation, I worked my way up through various marketing positions at different companies in the Bay Area. My first job was as a social media coordinator for a small tech startup that paid barely enough to cover rent and student loan payments. I learned quickly, took on extra projects, and slowly built a reputation for creating engaging content that actually converted to sales. Each job change brought a modest salary increase and more responsibility. By the time I was 27, I was a senior marketing strategist at a mid-sized software company, earning a respectable $75,000 a year. It wasn't a fortune, especially in the expensive Bay Area, but I was proud of building my career entirely on my own merit. Throughout these years, family gatherings followed a predictable pattern. Marcus would be asked about the business, his insights treated as profound wisdom despite his limited experience outside our family bubble. Vanessa, who had dropped out of community college after one semester and was working sporadically as a lifestyle influencer with modest success, would share her latest brand partnership or Instagram milestone to enthusiastic praise from our parents. "They're paying her to post photos," my mother would marvel. "She's so creative and entrepreneurial." When attention occasionally turned to me, the questions were perfunctory. "Still at that tech company, Sarah? That's nice. Are you saving money? You should be thinking about buying property, but of course, real estate is so expensive now." The subtext was clear: I was doing fine, adequately, nothing special. I was the dependable middle child who required no particular attention or celebration. I met David Castellanos at a marketing conference in San Jose 2 years ago. I had presented a case study on customer engagement strategies, and afterward, as I was gathering my materials, a voice behind me said, "That was brilliant. The way you broke down the psychological triggers behind brand loyalty, I've never heard it explained so clearly." I turned to find a man about my age with warm brown eyes, an easy smile, and an understated elegance in the way he carried himself. He wore a simple navy suit that fit perfectly, and there was something genuine in his expression that immediately put me at ease. We started talking about marketing psychology and somehow ended up continuing the conversation over coffee, then dinner, then a long walk through downtown San Jose that lasted until the restaurants were closing and the streets were nearly empty. David worked in sustainable architecture, he told me, designing eco-friendly commercial buildings. He was passionate about creating structures that minimized environmental impact while maximizing functionality and beauty. The way he described his work, you could tell it wasn't just a job but a calling. What struck me most about David wasn't his obvious intelligence or his kindness, though he had both in abundance. It was how he listened. Really listened. When I talked about my work or my ideas, he engaged with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that showed he was truly processing what I said. After years of being the overlooked middle child, having someone's complete attention felt revolutionary. We dated for a year before he proposed, and it was the happiest year of my life. David introduced me to his parents, Elena and Roberto Castellanos, over a casual dinner at their home in Palo Alto. They were warm and welcoming, asking about my work and interests with what seemed like authentic curiosity. His mother was elegant and soft-spoken, working as a professor of literature at Stanford. His father was quiet but observant, retired from what David vaguely described as international business. Their home was beautiful but not ostentatious, a Spanish-style villa with lovely gardens and artwork that looked original but nothing I recognized. What I appreciated most was how normal they seemed. They asked David to help his mother with something in the kitchen. His father showed me his collection of rare books, explaining their historical significance with professorial enthusiasm. When David's younger sister Sophia joined us, fresh from her shift at a community health clinic where she volunteered, the conversation flowed easily among topics ranging from local politics to the best hiking trails in the area. They felt like a family that genuinely enjoyed each other's company, something I found refreshing and a little foreign. I didn't introduce David to my family for several months. I wasn't embarrassed by him, quite the opposite. I was embarrassed by them, or rather, by how I knew they would react. My mother would assess his financial prospects. My father would interrogate him about his career trajectory and earning potential. Marcus would try to establish dominance through business talk. Vanessa would flirt inappropriately and then post photos with captions about meeting her sister's boyfriend as if she were the star of the narrative. When I finally arranged a family dinner, my anxieties proved well-founded. My mother spent the first 20 minutes asking pointed questions about David's job. How large is your firm? What's the typical project budget? Do you see yourself moving into ownership? My father wanted to know about David's family background, his education, his 5-year plan. Marcus launched into an unsolicited lecture about the dry cleaning industry's profit margins, clearly trying to impress. Vanessa kept touching David's arm and laughing too loudly at everything he said, later posting a photo of the dinner with the caption "Family Time with Sis" and her cute boyfriend. David handled it all with grace, answering questions politely and deflecting the more intrusive ones with humor. On the drive home, he was quiet for a while before saying gently, "Your family is very focused on success metrics." I cringed. "I'm sorry. They can be a lot. They mean well, I think. They just have very specific ideas about what matters." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're nothing like that, Sarah. That's one of the things I love most about you. You see people for who they are, not what they have or what they've accomplished." His words made me realize how much I had internalized my family's values despite resenting them. I had spent years trying to prove my worth through achievement, through career advancement and financial stability, because those were the metrics by which my family measured value. David's presence in my life was teaching me that there were other ways to assess worth, other definitions of success that had nothing to do with status or money. When David proposed during a weekend trip to Big Sur, presenting a simple but beautiful vintage ring that had belonged to his grandmother, I said yes without hesitation. We were standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean at sunset, and everything felt perfect. This is the person I want to build a life with, I thought. Someone who sees me, values me, loves me for who I actually am. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Planning the wedding, however, would prove to be an unexpected minefield. David and I both wanted something intimate and meaningful rather than a massive expensive production. We chose a small boutique hotel in Napa Valley that could accommodate 50 guests for the ceremony and reception. The venue was lovely, with vineyard views and a romantic garden setting, and the all-inclusive package was surprisingly reasonable at $18,000 for everything including food, drinks, and basic decorations. For my dress, I found a beautiful gown at a bridal salon during their sample sale. It was elegant ivory silk with delicate lace details, and it made me feel like the best version of myself. The original price had been $4,000, but I got it for $1,200 because it was a floor model. I was thrilled with the find, proud of getting something so perfect at such a reasonable price. We hired a talented photographer whose work I loved, a recent art school graduate building her portfolio who charged $3,000 for full-day coverage. We chose a simple buttercream cake from a local bakery known for incredible flavors over fancy fondant designs. For flowers, we selected seasonal blooms arranged simply rather than elaborate imported orchids. Our invitations were beautiful letterpress cards I found from a small studio, printed on recycled paper. Everything we chose reflected our values: sustainability, supporting small businesses, intimate rather than showy. Our total budget came to around $35,000, which felt significant to me. It was more than I had ever spent on any single thing in my life. But to my family, once they learned the details, it became a source of barely concealed embarrassment. The criticism started subtly at a family dinner 3 months before the wedding. My mother asked about our plans, and I enthusiastically described the venue, thinking she would appreciate our careful budgeting. "Napa Valley, that's nice," she said with a tight smile. "How many guests does the venue hold?" "About 50, I said. "We want to keep it intimate, just close family and friends." 50 people, my mother repeated. "Well, I suppose that's economical. More intimate weddings are becoming trendy now, aren't they?" Vanessa looked up from her phone. "Wait, only 50 people? But what about all our cousins? And mom and dad's business associates? You can't not invite the Changs and the Wongs, they've known us forever. We're keeping it to people who are genuinely close to us," I explained. "People we actually have relationships with, not just social obligations." Marcus snorted. "So basically a courthouse wedding with slightly better catering." "That's not what I said," I replied, feeling my defenses rising. "We've planned something meaningful and beautiful. It doesn't have to be a 300-person ballroom event to be special." My father set down his teacup with deliberate precision. "What's the per-person cost at this venue?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "It's an all-inclusive package," I hedged. "I'm asking what you're spending per guest," he pressed. I did the quick math. "About $360 per person for everything." My father's eyebrows rose. $360 per person. That includes ceremony, reception, all food and drinks and basic decorations. I added quickly. The silence that followed felt heavy with judgment. Well, my mother finally said, I suppose if that's what fits your budget. Her tone made budget sound like a euphemism for can't afford anything better. Vanessa piped up again. What are you doing for flowers? I'm working with a local florist, seasonal arrangements. So like, grocery store flowers? Vanessa asked. Not exactly, I said, struggling to keep my patience. Professionally arranged, just not exotic imports. We're being environmentally conscious about our choices. Marcus leaned back in his chair with the expression of someone about to deliver wisdom. You know, when I get married, it's going to be a proper event. At least 200 guests, probably at the Fairmont. You have to think about family reputation and business relationships. A wedding isn't just about the couple, it's about showing respect to your family and your community. I felt my face flush. Our wedding is about celebrating our commitment with the people we love. That's it. If people want to judge us for not spending $100,000 on one day, that's their problem. The conversation moved on, but the damage was done. Over the following weeks, I began to notice a pattern. My mother would mention the wedding to relatives with a tone that managed to be both apologetic and subtly critical. Sarah and David are doing a very small, simple ceremony. Very modern, very minimal. My father told his business associates that we were having a quiet family affair, emphasis on quiet in a way that suggested we were trying to avoid attention rather than choosing intimacy. Vanessa was the worst. She started posting on social media about wedding planning in general, sharing photos of elaborate celebrity weddings with captions like "This is how you do it right," and "Some people go all out for the most important day of their lives." When mutual friends asked if she was getting married, she would say, "Oh no, that's my sister's thing. I'm just showing her what's possible if you really prioritize your wedding." The passive aggression was breathtaking. The criticism extended to every choice David and I made. When I mentioned my sample sale dress, my mother's face fell. A floor model? But Sarah, that means other brides tried it on. Don't you want something that's yours, something new? I tried to explain that the dress had been professionally cleaned and was in perfect condition, that I loved it and it felt special to me. But that's just sad, honey, she said, shaking her head. Your wedding dress should be pristine, not someone else's rejected option. The photographer became another point of contention. You hired someone just out of school? Marcus asked incredulously. What if she screws up? Wedding photos are the one thing you have forever. You should book someone established, someone with a proven track record. I showed him examples of her work, which I thought was stunning, creative and emotional in ways that traditional wedding photography often wasn't. She's super talented, I insisted. She's going to capture the day beautifully. He scrolled through the portfolio with obvious skepticism. It's very artsy, he said finally. I guess that's fine if you don't care about having traditional formal portraits. Even our choice to skip a videographer was questioned. No video? My mother asked, aghast. But how will you remember the day? We'll remember it by living it, I said, exasperated. And we'll have hundreds of photos. Plus, videos add $5,000 to the budget for something we'd probably watch once. She shook her head sadly, as if I were making a tragic mistake I would regret for the rest of my life. The worst moment came at a family gathering 6 weeks before the wedding. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, was visiting from Portland with her husband and 2 adult children. The conversation inevitably turned to wedding plans, and I could see my mother's discomfort as she tried to describe our choices in the most flattering light possible. It's very eco-conscious, very thoughtful, she said vaguely. They're doing a Napa Valley thing. Aunt Patricia brightened. Oh, Napa. That sounds lovely. Which winery? It's actually a boutique hotel with vineyard views, I clarified. More intimate than a big winery venue. How many guests? My cousin Jennifer asked. About 50, I said, bracing myself. The reaction was immediate. Jennifer's eyes widened. 50? But you have such a big extended family. I felt obligated to explain. We wanted something intimate with our closest people. It's more meaningful that way. My Uncle James, who had never shown much interest in me before, suddenly had opinions. Intimate is one thing, but you don't want it to look like you couldn't afford a proper wedding. People talk, you know. Appearances matter. We're not concerned about appearances, I said firmly. We're planning a day that reflects our values and our relationship. Aunt Patricia exchanged a glance with my mother, one of those loaded looks that communicate volumes. Well, she said carefully, as long as you're happy with your choices. The conversation continued, but I felt myself withdrawing emotionally, building walls against their judgment. Vanessa, ever attuned to moments of maximum damage, chose this moment to share photos from a friend's recent wedding at a luxury resort in Maui. Now this is a wedding, she announced, showing images of elaborate floral installations, a multi-tier cake adorned with real flowers, and a reception in a ballroom with crystal chandeliers. 300 guests, full week of events, absolutely stunning. She looked at me with faux innocence. But I'm sure your thing will be nice too, Sarah. Different, but nice. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood there for 5 minutes, breathing deeply and fighting tears of frustration. Why did my choices have to be defended, justified, explained? Why couldn't my family just be happy for me? David's family had been nothing but supportive and excited about our plans. Elena had offered to help with any preparations and had asked thoughtful questions about our vision for the day. Roberto had toasted us at a family dinner, saying he couldn't wait to officially welcome me into their family. Sophia was planning a simple but lovely bridal shower, asking what would make me happiest rather than what would look most impressive. When I returned to the gathering, I found David in conversation with Marcus and my father. David was describing our honeymoon plans, a week in Costa Rica at an eco-resort where we would hike, explore, and disconnect from technology. Sounds rustic, my father said with barely concealed disapproval. Most couples I know go to Europe or at least Hawaii for their honeymoon. David smiled politely. We wanted adventure and nature over luxury resorts. It's more our style. Marcus laughed. Wait until you're married a few years. Then you'll want the luxury. I bit my tongue, feeling David's hand find mine and squeeze reassuringly. The rest of the evening was agony, smiling through thinly veiled criticisms and managing my family's obvious disappointment in my wedding that hadn't even happened yet. The night before the wedding, there was a rehearsal dinner at a nice Italian restaurant in Napa. David's family hosted, insisting on treating everyone despite my parents' half-hearted offer to split the cost. The dinner was lovely, warm and filled with genuine joy and laughter. Elena gave a beautiful toast about how lucky they were to welcome me into their family, how they had watched David become his best self since meeting me. Roberto spoke about the importance of partnership and mutual respect in marriage, looking at Elena with such obvious love that several people teared up. When it was my father's turn to speak, he stood awkwardly and offered a brief toast about hoping we would be happy and wishing us well. It was perfunctory, dutiful, entirely lacking the warmth of David's parents' speeches. My mother didn't speak at all, claiming she was too emotional, though I saw no evidence of actual emotion beyond general discomfort. After dinner, as we were saying goodnight, I overheard my mother talking to Aunt Patricia in the restaurant lobby. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. Tomorrow should be interesting, my mother said. It's all very simple, very modest. I just hope it doesn't look cheap. Patricia made a sympathetic sound. Well, at least it's small. Fewer people to witness it if things look underwhelming. I felt David's arm around my shoulders. He had heard too. Let's go, he said quietly. Tomorrow is about us, remember? Not about them. But their words followed me back to my hotel room where my bridesmaids were waiting for one final night together before the wedding. My best friend Melissa, who knew my family dynamics well, took one look at my face and said, "What did they say now?" I collapsed onto the bed and told her everything, the months of criticism, the constant comparisons, the barely hidden embarrassment my family felt about my modest wedding choices. Melissa listened, growing progressively more outraged. "Sarah," she said fiercely, your wedding is going to be absolutely beautiful because it reflects who you actually are. If your family can't see that, if they're more concerned with impressing people than celebrating your happiness, that's their loss. I know, I said, tears finally spilling over. I just wish they could be happy for me. Just once, I wish I was enough exactly as I am. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have known, was that tomorrow would bring revelations that would turn my family's assumptions upside down and force them to confront just how wrong they had been about everything. But in that moment, lying on a hotel bed the night before my wedding surrounded by friends who loved me unconditionally, all I felt was tired and sad and small. Tomorrow, I told myself, would be better. Tomorrow would be about David and me and the life we were choosing together. Tomorrow, I would marry the man I loved, and nothing else would matter. I had no idea just how right and how wrong that prediction would turn out to be. The morning of my wedding arrived with California sunshine streaming through the hotel windows and a knot of anxiety in my stomach that had nothing to do with pre-wedding jitters. My bridesmaids fluttered around the suite, helping with hair and makeup, adjusting the delicate lace on my sample sale dress, taking photos of every moment. Melissa kept the champagne flowing and the atmosphere light, but she knew me well enough to recognize the tension I was carrying. You're worried about your family, she said quietly while the others were occupied with their own preparations. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Sarah, look at me. She waited until I met her eyes. Today is your day. You're marrying someone who loves you completely, who sees you and values you. Whatever happens with your family, whatever they say or don't say, that's the truth you need to hold on to. I hugged her tightly, grateful beyond words for friends who understood. The morning passed in a blur of activity, foundation and eyeshadow, curling irons and hairspray, the rustle of dresses and the click of heels on tile floors. When I finally looked at myself in the full-length mirror, completely ready, I felt a rush of emotion. The dress fit perfectly, the alterations I had made emphasizing the elegant simplicity I loved. My hair was swept up in a soft romantic style with small white flowers tucked into the arrangement. I looked like myself, just elevated, polished, happy. My mother arrived to see me before the ceremony, knocking tentatively on the suite door. When she entered and saw me, her hand went to her mouth and for a moment I thought I saw genuine emotion in her eyes. "Oh Sarah," she said softly. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, Mom," I managed, blinking back tears. She crossed the room and adjusted a strand of hair that had fallen loose, a gesture so maternal and tender that it caught me off guard. Despite everything, despite all the criticism and disappointment, this was still my mother on my wedding day. "I brought you something," she said, pulling a small box from her purse. "It's the pearl necklace your grandmother gave me on my wedding day. I thought you might want to wear it." The necklace was simple and elegant, a single strand of creamy pearls with a small diamond clasp. I had seen my mother wear it on special occasions throughout my childhood. The fact that she was offering it to me now felt significant, perhaps her way of showing approval even if she couldn't quite articulate it. "I'd be honored," I said, turning so she could fasten it around my neck. The pearls lay cool against my skin, and looking in the mirror, I had to admit they completed the look perfectly. My mother's hands rested briefly on my shoulders as we both looked at our reflection. "You really do look lovely," she said again. "I hope you'll be very happy, Sarah." Before I could respond, before I could ask if this meant she was finally accepting my choices, Vanessa burst through the door with her phone already raised to take photos. "Oh my God, this is so Instagram-worthy," she announced. "Sarah, turn this way. Mom, get closer. Perfect." She snapped several photos without asking, already composing captions in her head no doubt. The moment of connection with my mother dissolved as quickly as it had formed. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon in the hotel's garden, time to take advantage of the golden hour lighting for photographs. As my bridesmaids headed down to take their places, I found myself alone for a few precious minutes. I stood at the window overlooking the vineyard, watching guests arrive and take their seats. The setting was exactly what David and I had envisioned, intimate and beautiful, rows of white chairs on the lawn, an arch decorated with greenery and white flowers, the rolling hills of wine country creating a stunning backdrop. I could see my family being seated in the front row. My father in his best suit looking uncomfortable in the heat. My mother fussing with her dress and glancing around at the other guests. Marcus with his girlfriend Claire, both of them looking vaguely bored already. Vanessa filming everything on her phone despite the unplugged ceremony request. Aunt Patricia and her family had chosen seats with optimal photo opportunities. On the other side of the aisle, David's family was being seated. Elena looked radiant in a soft blue dress, smiling warmly at arriving guests. Sophia was directing people to their seats with cheerful efficiency. And then Roberto appeared, walking slowly, speaking to someone I couldn't quite see from my angle. There was something different about the energy on David's side, a relaxed joy that contrasted sharply with my family's obvious assessment of everything around them. A knock on the door pulled me from my observations. It was time. My father appeared to walk me down the aisle, offering his arm with formal stiffness. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," I replied, tucking my hand into the crook of his elbow. As we made our way through the hotel and out toward the garden, my father cleared his throat several times, clearly wanting to say something but struggling with the words. Finally, as we paused just out of view of the assembled guests, he said, "Your mother and I just want you to be secure, Sarah. That's all we've ever wanted. Financial stability, a comfortable life. That's why we've been concerned about some of your choices." "I know, Dad," I said quietly. "But security means different things to different people. For me, it's about being with someone who respects me and shares my values." We stood in silence for a moment, the string quartet beginning the processional music. Then my father nodded once, sharply, and we began walking. The ceremony itself passed in a dreamlike haze. I was aware of faces turning toward us as we processed down the aisle, aware of the music and the perfect weather and the beauty of the setting. But my focus narrowed to David standing at the altar, his face transforming as he watched me approach. The love and wonder in his expression made everything else fade away. This man saw me, valued me, chose me. Nothing else mattered. Our vows were personal and heartfelt, promises we had written ourselves about partnership and growth and facing life's adventures together. David's voice cracked with emotion as he promised to always listen to my ideas, to support my dreams, to build a life based on mutual respect rather than prescribed roles. My own vows spoke to finding someone who saw past the labels and expectations, who loved the real me rather than some idealized version. When the officiant pronounced us married and David kissed me, I heard applause and cheers, but it all seemed to come from very far away. In that moment, there was only us, only this commitment we had made, only the beginning of our life together. As we walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, I caught glimpses of reactions. Elena dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Sophia grinning widely and giving us an enthusiastic thumbs up. My mother looking composed but distant. Vanessa filming everything on her phone despite the no phones request. The cocktail hour took place on a terrace overlooking the vineyards, with servers circulating among guests offering wine and hors d'oeuvres. David and I were immediately swept up in a receiving line of well-wishers, hugs and congratulations and toasts with champagne flutes that kept being refilled. I noticed my family clustered together near one corner, speaking among themselves rather than mingling with other guests. My mother kept glancing at David's family with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between curiosity and assessment. I was talking with some of David's college friends when I heard my mother's voice carrying from nearby. She was speaking with Aunt Patricia, and while I couldn't hear every word, certain phrases reached me clearly. Very simple ceremony, quite short really, nothing too elaborate, perfectly nice for what it is. Each comment felt like a small cut, death by 1,000 qualifications. Melissa appeared at my elbow with fresh champagne and a protective glare in my family's direction. "Ignore them," she said firmly. "Look around you, Sarah. Everyone here is having a wonderful time. This is exactly what you wanted, intimate and meaningful." She was right. Guests were mingling easily, the photographer was capturing beautiful candid moments, the setting sun was painting everything in gorgeous golden light. David's hand found mine and he leaned down to whisper, "Having fun, Mrs. Castellanos?" The new name sent a thrill through me. The best time, I whispered back. As the cocktail hour transitioned into the reception, guests made their way to the dining room where our 50 seats were arranged at round tables decorated with simple elegant centerpieces of seasonal flowers and candles. Place cards directed everyone to their assigned seats. David and I had agonized over the seating chart, trying to create groupings where people would genuinely enjoy each other's company. We had seated my family together at one table, a decision I was now second-guessing as I watched them settle in with expressions that ranged from boredom to poorly concealed disdain. The dinner service began with a butter lettuce salad, followed by a choice of herb-crusted salmon or filet mignon with roasted vegetables. I had tasted both options during our menu planning and knew the food was exceptional, fresh, and beautifully prepared. But I watched my father cut into his steak with the methodical precision of someone conducting an evaluation rather than enjoying a meal. Marcus was describing something to Claire, gesturing dismissively at the table decorations. Vanessa was photographing her plate from multiple angles, probably for a post about wedding food trends. Meanwhile, David's table was engaged in animated conversation and laughter. His uncle told a story that had everyone roaring. Elena was deep in discussion with one of David's business school professors about a book they had both recently read. The contrast between the two tables was stark and painful to observe. Why couldn't my family just relax and enjoy themselves? Why did everything have to be judged and found wanting? The toasts began after the main course. The best man, David's college roommate Nathan, spoke eloquently about David's character and integrity, about how he had watched his friend become even more thoughtful and grounded since meeting me. He shared funny anecdotes about their adventures together and tender observations about the way David spoke about me, with respect and genuine admiration. His toast was heartfelt and perfectly pitched, funny without being embarrassing, sweet without being saccharine. Melissa's maid of honor speech was next, and she began by addressing me directly. "Sarah," she said, "I have watched you navigate challenges with grace and determination for years. You've built an incredible career, maintained your values even when pressured to compromise them, and remained kind even to people who didn't always appreciate you." Her eyes flickered briefly toward my family's table. Finding David wasn't about finding someone to complete you, because you were already complete. It was about finding someone who recognized and celebrated that completeness. The room was silent, hanging on her words. "David is lucky to have you," she continued, "but I think he knows that. I see the way he looks at you, the way he listens when you speak, the way he supports your goals without trying to reshape them to fit his expectations. That's not luck, that's recognition. He sees your worth, and that makes him worthy of you." She raised her glass. "To Sarah and David, may your marriage be built on the foundation you've already established, mutual respect, genuine partnership, and love that sees and celebrates the truth of who you are." The applause was thunderous. I was crying, and I noticed I wasn't alone. Elena was openly weeping happy tears. Several of David's friends were wiping their eyes. Even some of my more distant relatives looked moved. But when I glanced at my family's table, I saw my mother's lips pressed into a thin line, my father looking uncomfortable, Marcus whispering something to Claire that made her smirk. Only Vanessa seemed engaged, but she was filming the speech on her phone rather than actually experiencing it. As the evening progressed and dinner plates were cleared, the energy in the room shifted from formal to festive. The cake cutting was relaxed and sweet, David and I feeding each other small bites of the champagne and vanilla cake with fresh berry filling while guests cheered and cameras flashed. Our first dance as a married couple took place to a song we both loved, and midway through, the dance floor opened to all couples. I watched Elena and Roberto join the dancing, moving together with the ease of decades of partnership. My own parents stayed seated, my father claiming his knees hurt and my mother saying she was too tired. During the dancing, I made my rounds to different tables, thanking guests for coming and sharing moments with people who had been part of our journey. At David's family table, Sophia hugged me tightly and said, "Welcome to the family, officially. We're so happy you're one of us now." Elena kissed both my cheeks and told me I was radiant, glowing with happiness. Roberto shook my hand formally and then pulled me into an unexpected hug, saying quietly, "You've made my son very happy, Sarah. That makes you precious to us." When I reached my family's table, the reception was markedly different. My mother complimented the cake and said the salmon had been cooked well. My father nodded and said it was a nice evening. Marcus offered that the venue had decent acoustics. Vanessa showed me the photos she had posted, already receiving likes and comments, more interested in the social media performance of the wedding than the actual event. Aunt Patricia made vague comments about how nice it was to see everyone. No one said congratulations with genuine warmth. No one expressed happiness about my marriage or excitement about my future. It was all surface pleasantries, polite and hollow. I felt the familiar ache of not being enough, of my joy not being sufficient to warrant their genuine celebration. David appeared at my side, sensing my discomfort with the intuition that came from truly knowing someone. "Dance with me," he said, extending his hand. I let him lead me back to the dance floor, away from my family's lukewarm approval, into the warmth of his arms and the certainty of his love. As the evening drew toward its close, the photographer gathered family groupings for formal portraits. First, David's extended family assembled, a large cheerful group that required several shots to get everyone looking at the camera simultaneously because they kept making each other laugh. Then it was my family's turn. We arranged ourselves in stiff formation, my mother and father in the center, Marcus and Vanessa flanking them, me on the end next to David. The photographer tried to get us to relax, to smile naturally, but the resulting images would surely capture the tension and disconnection that characterized our relationships. Just as we were finishing the family portraits, Roberto approached and asked the photographer if she could capture one more grouping. "David's entire family plus Sarah," he said with a warm smile. "I want to commemorate welcoming her officially into the Castellanos family." The photographer agreed enthusiastically, and suddenly I was being positioned in the center of David's family, Elena on one side and David on the other, Sophia and Roberto behind us, various aunts and uncles and cousins filling out the frame. The difference was immediately palpable. Where my family photos felt obligatory and strained, this grouping felt joyful. People were genuinely smiling, arms around each other with real affection, inside jokes being whispered that prompted natural laughter. When the photographer showed us the preview on her camera screen, the image captured something my own family portraits never had: authentic connection and happiness. I noticed my mother watching from nearby, her expression unreadable. Was she comparing the two family groupings? Could she see the stark difference in energy and genuine warmth? Part of me hoped she could, that it might prompt some reflection on why my relationship with David's family felt so much easier than with my own. But mostly, I tried to push those thoughts aside and simply be present in this moment of being embraced by my new family. As the reception wound down and guests began departing, showering us with lavender instead of rice as they formed a tunnel for us to walk through, I felt exhausted but genuinely happy. The day had been beautiful, exactly what David and I had envisioned. Yes, my family's disapproval had cast some shadows, but they hadn't ruined the fundamental joy of the occasion. We had gotten married surrounded by love, even if not all of it came from the sources I wished it had. David and I were staying at the hotel that night before flying to Costa Rica the next afternoon for our honeymoon. As we finally made our way back to our suite, still in our wedding attire, he pulled me close and said, "You did it. You created exactly the day you wanted despite all the pressure to make it something else. I'm so proud of you, Sarah." His words opened a floodgate of emotion I had been holding back all day. I cried against his shoulder, releasing the tension and hurt and frustration I had been carrying for months. He held me, not trying to fix it or minimize it, just providing space for me to feel everything I needed to feel. When I finally calmed down, he gently wiped my tears and said, "Tomorrow morning, before we leave for the airport, my father wants to have breakfast with us. Just the three of us. He said there's something he wants to discuss." I felt a flutter of anxiety. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," David assured me. "I think he just wants to talk to us as a married couple, maybe offer some wisdom or something. You know how he is, traditional in some ways." I nodded, too tired to worry about it tonight. We helped each other out of our wedding clothes, carefully hanging the dress and suit, and fell into bed exhausted but content. The next morning arrived too quickly. I woke to find David already showered and dressed, looking slightly nervous in a way I rarely saw. "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately alert. Nothing's wrong, he said, but his smile was tight. My father has asked to meet us in the hotel restaurant in 30 minutes. I think whatever he wants to discuss, it's important. I showered quickly and dressed in comfortable travel clothes, our suitcases already packed for Costa Rica sitting near the door. As we walked to the restaurant, David was quieter than usual. I tried asking what he thought his father wanted to talk about, but he just shook his head and said, I honestly don't know, but knowing my father, it's significant. Roberto was already seated at a quiet corner table when we arrived, 3 coffee cups waiting. He stood as we approached, kissing my cheek and embracing David before we all sat down. The server brought pastries and fruit, and we made small conversation about the wedding, how beautiful everything had been, how much his family had enjoyed it. But I could sense something else beneath the surface, an undercurrent of purpose. Finally, after the server refilled our coffee and left us alone, Roberto set down his cup and looked at both of us with an expression that was serious but not unkind. Sarah, David, he began, there is something I need to discuss with you before you leave for your honeymoon. Something that I should have perhaps addressed earlier, but the timing never seemed right. My heart started beating faster. Was there a problem? Had we done something wrong? David reached for my hand under the table. Dad, what is it? He asked, his voice steady but concerned. Roberto took a breath and then said something that made no sense to me at first. I want to talk to you about your honeymoon arrangements and about certain realities of our family that we have chosen to keep private, but which Sarah deserves to know now that she is officially part of the Castellanos family. I glanced at David, confused, and saw that he had gone very still. Roberto continued, pulling out his phone and opening what looked like a travel confirmation. You've booked a week at an eco-resort in Costa Rica, which is lovely. However, I have taken the liberty of making alternative arrangements for your honeymoon. I hope you'll forgive the presumption, but I believe you'll find these arrangements more comfortable and private. He turned the phone toward us, and I found myself looking at photographs of the most stunning property I had ever seen. Pristine white sand beaches, impossibly blue water, an enormous modern villa with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. The images looked like something from an architectural magazine, almost unreal in their perfection. This is our family property in the Maldives, Roberto said calmly, as if he were discussing a weekend cabin rather than what was clearly a multi-million-dollar estate. It's completely private, situated on its own small island. I've arranged for the staff to prepare it for your arrival. The jet is fueled and ready whenever you wish to depart. The words were coming at me too fast to process. Family property. Maldives. Private island. Jet. I looked at David, whose face had flushed red, not with embarrassment but with what looked like discomfort at this revelation. Sarah, Roberto said gently, drawing my attention back to him. I apologize for the surprise, but David has always been adamant about keeping certain aspects of our family background private. He wanted you to know him, to love him, for who he is rather than what he comes from. I respected that choice, but now that you are married, now that you are truly part of this family, there are things you should know. I found my voice, though it came out shaky. I don't understand. What things? Roberto set his phone down and folded his hands on the table. My family's business, the international work I retired from, was not a small enterprise. The Castellanos family holdings include commercial real estate, sustainable development projects, and various investments across multiple countries. David grew up with access to considerable resources, but he has always chosen to live relatively modestly and to build his career on his own merits rather than family connections. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I looked at David, searching his face for confirmation or denial. Is this true? I asked. He nodded slowly, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. It's true. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Sarah. I wanted you to know me as just David, not as someone defined by family money. I didn't want that to influence how you saw me or what you thought about our relationship. But, I started, then stopped, my mind spinning. The villa in Palo Alto. Your parents' art collection. The way your family travels. I thought back to all the small signs I had noticed but dismissed, the quality of everything in their home, the casual way they discussed international travel, the expensive cars I had assumed were financed like everyone else's. Roberto reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. Inside this folder are the details of the Maldives property and the travel arrangements. Also included is information about a wedding gift Elena and I would like to give you. We have established a trust in your names that will provide a foundation for your future, whatever that future may hold. He slid the folder across the table to us. I couldn't bring myself to open it. This was too much, too surreal. Just yesterday my family had been criticizing my modest wedding choices, implying that David and I couldn't afford anything better. And now I was being told that my husband came from the kind of wealth that included private islands and jets and trusts. Roberto must have seen the shock on my face because his expression softened with understanding. Sarah, I know this is overwhelming. David wanted to tell you many times, but he was concerned about how it might change things between you. He loves that you see him for who he truly is, that you built your relationship on shared values rather than material considerations. I finally looked at David, really looked at him, and saw the anxiety in his eyes. He was afraid, I realized. Afraid that this revelation would somehow alter how I felt about him, about us. The irony was almost painful. My family had spent months criticizing our wedding for being too modest, too cheap, too embarrassing. They had worried about appearances and what people would think. And all along, David had access to wealth beyond anything they could imagine but had chosen not to flaunt it. I'm not upset that you have money, I said slowly, working through my thoughts out loud. I'm just trying to understand why you didn't tell me. David exhaled shakily. Because every relationship I had before you, people changed when they found out. They started seeing dollar signs instead of seeing me. They wanted the lifestyle, the access, the status. With you, everything was different. You cared about my ideas, my work, my character. You never once asked about my financial situation or seemed interested in what I could provide materially. That was precious to me, Sarah. I didn't want to risk losing it. The server approached to refill our coffee, and we sat in silence until she left. Roberto cleared his throat gently. The Maldives property is yours to use for as long as you wish. 2 weeks, a month, whatever feels right for your honeymoon. The staff is discreet and well-trained. You'll have complete privacy. And when you return, perhaps we can discuss how you'd like to handle things going forward with your family and friends. My family. The thought of them hit me like cold water. They had no idea. They were probably at home right now, discussing my simple wedding with a mixture of pity and superiority. My mother was likely telling relatives about how I had done the best I could with limited resources. Marcus was probably making jokes about budget weddings. Vanessa was posting comparison photos of elaborate celebrity weddings versus my modest affair. What about my family? I asked. What do I tell them? Roberto and David exchanged glances. That's entirely up to you, Roberto said. Some families in our position keep these matters private. Others are more open. David has always preferred discretion, but you're part of this family now. Your comfort and your choices matter equally. I thought about my mother's comments, my father's concerns about financial security, Marcus's implications that David and I couldn't afford a proper wedding. I thought about months of subtle and not so subtle criticism, of being made to feel less than, inadequate, embarrassing. A small, petty part of me wanted them to know, wanted to see their faces when they realized how completely wrong they had been. But a larger part of me, the part that David had fallen in love with, recoiled from that impulse. Using wealth to prove a point felt hollow and contrary to everything I actually valued. David had been right to keep this private. The best parts of our relationship had nothing to do with money. They were built on mutual respect, shared interests, genuine connection. Did I really want to introduce his family's wealth into the equation now? I don't know what to do, I admitted. Part of me wants them to know they were wrong about everything. But that feels petty and small. Roberto nodded thoughtfully. It's not petty to want validation, Sarah. Your family has been unfair in their judgments. But I would caution you to think about what outcome you truly want. Do you want to change their opinion of David's worth, or do you want them to recognize your worth regardless of who you married? His question cut to the heart of it. What I really wanted was for my family to celebrate me, to be proud of my choices, to see value in who I was rather than constantly measuring me against arbitrary standards. Whether David came from money or not shouldn't matter to that fundamental desire for acceptance and recognition. We sat with our coffee growing cold, the breakfast pastries untouched. Finally, David spoke. "Sarah, whatever you decide, I support completely. If you want to tell your family, we tell them. If you want to keep this private, we keep it private. This is your choice." I reached for the folder Roberto had given us and opened it slowly. Inside were details about the Maldives villa, photos that somehow exceeded the beauty of what I had already seen. There were travel itineraries, staff contact information, a letter from Elena welcoming me to the family. And at the bottom, documents outlining the trust Roberto had mentioned, numbers so large they seemed abstract and unreal. I closed the folder carefully. "I think," I said slowly, working through my thoughts, "I don't want to tell them right now. Maybe not ever." Our wedding was beautiful because it reflected our actual values. David and I chose simplicity and meaning over extravagance. That choice was real and true, regardless of what we could have afforded. I don't want to invalidate that by turning it into some kind of gotcha moment. David's relief was visible, his shoulders relaxing tension I hadn't realized he was carrying. Roberto smiled, a warm, genuine expression. "That is a wise and mature choice, Sarah. It speaks well of your character." He stood, signaling the end of our breakfast meeting. "The plane will be ready whenever you wish to depart. Take your time, enjoy your honeymoon, and welcome officially to the family." After he left, David and I sat together in the quiet restaurant, processing everything. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I should have told you sooner." I shook my head. "I understand why you didn't. And honestly, this doesn't change anything important. You're still the same person I fell in love with. We're still building the same life together." He kissed me then, tender and grateful. "I love you, Sarah Chin Castellanos." "I love you too," I replied. "Now, tell me about this private island." We spent the next hour looking through the folder together, David sharing stories about childhood vacations to the Maldives, about learning to scuba dive in those crystal waters, about the staff who had worked for his family for decades. He showed me photos on his phone of the villa, the endless ocean views, the infinity pool, the private beach. It was stunning, dreamlike, almost impossible to believe it was real and available to us. By early afternoon, we were on a private plane heading across the Pacific. The flight itself was surreal, plush leather seats that reclined into beds, a flight attendant who anticipated our every need, champagne and gourmet meals served on actual china. I kept looking at David, this man I thought I knew completely, seeing him now with additional layers of understanding. He was still David, still the thoughtful architect passionate about sustainable design, still the man who listened when I spoke and supported my ambitions. But he was also this, someone who had grown up with access to extraordinary privilege and had chosen to live humbly anyway. The Maldives exceeded every expectation. Our villa sat on a tiny private island, accessible only by boat from the main resort island where the staff quarters were located. The structure was modern and open, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing ocean views from every room. The master suite had a bathroom that opened directly onto a private beach. There was a kitchen stocked with everything we could want, a wine cellar, a library, an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. For 2 weeks, we existed in a paradise that felt removed from reality. We snorkeled in water so clear we could see 50 feet down. We kayaked at sunset and watched dolphins play in our wake. We read books in hammocks strung between palm trees and made love on beaches where we were the only humans for miles. The staff materialized when needed and disappeared when we wanted privacy, bringing fresh meals and maintaining the property with invisible efficiency. One evening as we watched the sun set from our pool, glasses of wine in hand, I finally brought up what had been on my mind. "Do you think my family will ever see me differently?" I asked David. He considered the question carefully. I think they see you through a lens shaped by their own values and insecurities. Whether that ever changes depends on whether they're willing to examine those values. But Sarah, their vision of you doesn't define your worth. You know that, right? I did know it, intellectually. But emotionally, the desire for parental approval ran deep. We talked long into the night about family dynamics, about the patterns we inherit and the ones we choose to break. David shared his own struggles with his family's expectations, the pressure to join the family business, the assumptions people made about him because of his background. We had both, in different ways, fought to be seen as ourselves rather than extensions of our family's identities. When we finally returned home, tanned and relaxed and deeply connected, real life reasserted itself quickly. There were thank you notes to write, wedding gifts to open, photos to review. And inevitably, there was my family. My mother called the day after we got back, asking about the honeymoon. How was Costa Rica? She asked. We actually didn't go to Costa Rica, I said carefully. David's father arranged for us to stay at a family property instead. Oh, where? She asked, sounding only mildly interested. The Maldives, I said, keeping my voice neutral. There was a pause. The Maldives? That must have been expensive. It was a family property, I repeated. No cost to us. Another pause, longer this time. I see. Well, that was generous of them. The conversation moved on quickly, my mother not quite knowing what to make of this information but not curious enough to dig deeper. Over the following months, David and I settled into married life. We bought a modest home in a neighborhood we loved, furnished it with a mix of pieces we chose together, and continued our careers with renewed focus. We used some of the trust Roberto had established to fund a scholarship for first-generation college students, something that felt meaningful and aligned with our values. The Castellanos family wealth remained largely in the background of our lives, there if we needed it but not defining our daily existence. My family gradually adjusted to my marriage, though the dynamics remained complicated. They were polite to David, cordial at family gatherings, but there was always an undertone of their original judgments. I had married sensibly if modestly, in their view. They had no idea that modest was a choice rather than a limitation. And I found I preferred it that way. Let them think what they wanted. David and I knew the truth of our relationship, and that was enough. Sometimes I think about that wedding day, about my family's barely concealed disappointment in my choices. I think about how close I came to letting their judgment diminish my joy. And then I think about the life David and I have built, one based on authentic values rather than appearances. We had chosen a simple wedding not because we couldn't afford more, but because more didn't align with what mattered to us. That choice, made freely and intentionally, represented everything important about our partnership. The irony isn't lost on me. My family wanted me to marry well, to achieve security and status. And I did marry well, just not in the ways they would have measured or recognized. I married someone who saw my worth, who respected my intelligence, who partnered with me as an equal. The fact that he also happened to come from extraordinary wealth was incidental to what made our marriage valuable. Looking back now, I'm grateful David kept his background private during our courtship. It allowed us to build something real, uncontaminated by assumptions or expectations about money. And I'm grateful I chose not to use that information to prove anything to my family. Their validation, I finally understood, was never what I actually needed. What I needed was to validate myself, to trust my own judgment, to build a life aligned with my values regardless of others' opinions. My modest wedding, criticized and dismissed by my family, was actually perfect. It was honest, meaningful, and true to who David and I actually are. No revelation about hidden wealth could make it more perfect than it already was. That's the real lesson I learned, that worth isn't measured in dollars or status or impressive displays. It's measured in authenticity, in alignment between values and actions, in the courage to choose meaning over appearances. And that understanding, more than any trust fund or private island, is the real treasure I gained from marrying David Castellanos. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.